Welcome to the section of this course on assessment. And I've referenced this section several times throughout earlier videos. And assessment is an area of Harkness practice that, as I've suggested or hinted, I am right now in 2025 having somewhat of an evolving feeling about. And I'll go on to describe this later on in the videos in this chapter. But first, let me show you a slideshow that I show to my students in the Harkness Strategies course about the nature of assessment and the pluses and the minuses of a few different approaches to assessment. So assessment is something that is certainly happening at CVU, as it is happening at, I think, every school that I know of in Vermont that is having Harkness discussion, mainly Hazen Union, North Country, and Harwood, which in Vermont, as I've certainly suggested, is sort of like the Harkness mothership. That's where I learned it from. So I think some things to think about when you think about assessing discussion is that it can be flexible, but you want to make sure that it's transparent. You want to make sure that it is geared towards the type of behaviors that are important to you in your class, and that it is an opportunity for feedback. I'll get into that in just a little bit more. I think one of the pros of assessment is that, Harkness discussion is inherently vulnerable. And a lot of young people, when they experience the discomfort of vulnerability, they burn the bridge. They'll not take it seriously. They'll start joking around. If it's really extreme, they might even start being disrespectful to you or to other people. Maybe they'll shut down. They'll shrink from the moment, which is developmentally appropriate, but also we want to teach them the grit of pushing through that. And assessment can cause students to or motivate students to buckle down and take it seriously and fill out their prep sheets with thoroughness and to annotate their text and to take the collaboration seriously because there is that external motivator of the grade. Now, I'll talk about the other side of that in just a second. Some other pros, like I said, it's an opportunity to give feedback on the complex skill of having a collaborative discussion. It's also an opportunity, it's an avenue to ask your students to be metacognitive, to think about their thinking as it relates to discussion. Okay, so the cons. So when I said that assessment is an external motivator, what that can also breed is a lack of authenticity. Meaning, I'll give you an example, that if a 3, one of the things that students need to do for a 3 in discussions in your class is that they have to speak twice and ask a probing question. Well, then you might have kids at your table who are saying things like, I have a probing question. Or if you're asking them to use sentence stems, they'll say things like, well, Tim, to build off your comment. Now, those are fine things to say. But what I hope you can glean from my tone is that the students are not speaking in a way that is authentic to them. And that ultimately what we want students to be bringing into discussion is their true selves. Now, that takes time, especially in 9th and 10th grade. Students may need to mature into that. I feel, especially once you get into 10th grade, that assessment can tamp down or point students in the wrong direction, away from valuing authenticity. I also think that it points students in the direction of competitiveness, which is even worse than inauthenticity. For example, if you're saying that to get a 4 in your skill of discussion in your class, students need to be leaders. Well, that means that you need to codify the moves that they need to do to lead. Well, what if the moves that you've codified really only meaningfully need to be accomplished by 2 or 3 students? That means you have this bottleneck where everyone is trying to be one of those 2 or 3 students, and kids are just worried about getting in. Now, to me, that you're starting to harm the overall quality of discussion by really stressing kids out more than they otherwise would be. But then on the other hand, if you don't grade, might the kids not take it seriously? I've asked a lot of students this question, including in student audits of Harkness discussion, and students seem to be split. When I ask students, if we didn't assess, would you take it less seriously? About half of them say, no, I would still take it seriously, and half of them say, half of them say, no, I wouldn't take it as seriously without a grade, and half of them say, yes, I would still take it seriously. So this is an evolving aspect of practice at CVU. And one thing I'll just add to this slide is that if anyone should assess Harkness for the discussion itself, I think it should be 9th graders. Because I really think 9th graders need a little bit of extra carrot to force themselves through the discomfort of the prep and the experience. In my experience, the older the student, the less they really the less they need that carrot. So one piece of advice I would like to give you guys, though, is that in my experience, you want to steer clear of one summative discussion. Now, this is in practice at CVU. So there are people at CVU who disagree with me, and these are excellent educators who are doing this. So I want to just qualify this by saying this is my preference, this is my style. If you want to experiment with a summative discussion, go for it. But in my experience, any problems that I just mentioned in the previous slide about competitiveness and lack of authenticity, having one summative discussion exacerbates those problems. So, but despite also, like I mentioned in the last slide, I did have summative discussions in 9th grade, and they seemed to work pretty well. When I tried to have a summative discussion the first time I taught 10th grade, it did not go well. One way to get around this is to develop a formula, like you can see on the right side of this slide, whereby every discussion is formative, and you can identify that you need to see X things or X number of scores or a certain type of trend in order to give a summative score. I'm going to show you in the next section a holistic way of using formative assessment in discussion that I think will probably be the way that I go. But let me just say again, that's just my style. There's a wide variety of approaches to assessment happening at CVU. Tracking, for me, is the way to assess. As you may remember from the tracking chapter of this course, I like to use the 2-column tracker that you can see on the left. I also have been using equity maps. Both of those give me a wide variety of data that I can use to then go in and assess. If I was to assess the discussion itself, the next section, or I believe it's the next section, another section in this chapter, gets into assessing, using the discussion as a means of assessing other things other than the discussion. Right now, I'm just talking about assessing the actual discussion itself. The trackers to me, that's the way you gather the data and provide a score. So in this chapter, you're going to look at a bunch of different scales, a bunch of different assessments, and you're going to see what you like and what you don't. This is a scale that I used several years ago that I think pretty meaningfully defines the things that I'd like to see to be able to say that a student is proficient at having a Harkness discussion. I have moved on from this scale to some extent, but I think it is a good placeholder for your purposes if you're just learning this. The only thing that I think that I really want to caution you against that is on the screen right now is this fifth bullet here on the left where it says participate at least twice. I would be comfortable saying at this point, and I should have just taken it off and not had it there, but since I'm seeing it now, I want to just point out that I really don't think there are many people having Harkness discussions at CVU and who are assessing them who are saying that you have to say something a certain number of times. I think that there are some problems with that, and I'm going to talk about ways to get around those. I would encourage you to not think about number of contributions. I would encourage you to think about the quality of the contributions and providing students a workaround on their prep sheet. If they're having a hard time getting in, can they put their contributions on the prep sheet? Just food for thought. Okay, canned feedback. When I have assessed discussion, what I would do is I would make a document with the scale. I would assign everybody that document on Google Classroom as an assignment, so everyone had their own copy. And then I would go into each document and I would add a comment over the score that I was going to provide. So I essentially added a comment to the 3 box on this slide, as you can see. And I would just add written feedback, explaining why they got a 3, what I'd like to see more of, what I'd like to see less of, thoughts for them. What I found is that I was frequently, especially the later we got, the more discussions we had, I was providing the same feedback over and over and over again. So I created a Google Doc basically with just canned feedback, and plenty of times I would just copy and paste that feedback right into a comment, maybe add an additional sentence with one specific piece of contextual feedback, and that would be it. If students knew, they never complained, and frankly, I thought that the time savings was worth it. So your activity in this chapter is going to be looking at 4 assessments. I think they're all from CVU. There might be one Harwood in there. And I'd just love to know your pros and cons. As you look at them, what do you like? What do you not like? And there are some scenarios, too, that are asking you to think critically about things like unintended consequences, competitiveness, authenticity, or lack thereof as a result of your assessment.